it is all about grit. Like I can give a ton of different stories. Like when we first started out, we needed beverage processing to extend that shelf life. So from 4 days, we needed to get it to like 60 days, 75 days. So we tweaked our formulation, and then we needed to actually send it to a beverage processing company. And it was all the way up in Connecticut, and it was about 2.5 hours away. And when I reached out to them, they were like, yeah, we'll do it. But we can't do it in the middle of the day. You have to literally be the first one in the morning when we open, and we open at 5:30 in the morning. And it was 2.5 hours away. So I put everything in coolers, ice, put it in the back of my car, and drove up and got there literally 5:30 in the morning, waiting for the gate to open. And once the gate opened, we gave it to them, and they were like, okay, come back in an hour. Picked it all up, drove it back into the city, put it back in the refrigerator.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 3 of Take the Next Step. I am your host, Brian Sterling. It's my job in this podcast to interview someone who has taken on a personal growth journey. Stories range from weight loss journeys to entrepreneurship stories to really everything in between. And I'm really excited today to have my friend Siwat Siengsanaoh on the podcast. Siwat is the founder of Recoup Wellness. Recoup is a ginger-based recovery beverage. I happen to have a Recoup here with me right now. And this isn't just a prop. I am an avid customer of Recoup. I usually have one once a day to help aid in my recovery from my various workouts. And I've been a fan for a long time. Siwat is also a very good friend of mine and someone who I think embodies the take the next step mindset to a T. In this episode, we talk about the full story of Recoup, from when it was an idea in his head, when he put it in a journal to open at a later date, to when he first bought a juicer and tried out different recipes. We talk about his first sale, and we talk about where he is today with respect to his distribution, how many stores he's in, etc. It truly is the take the next step mindset. And for anybody who's interested in starting a business or really taking on any personal growth journey, I think you can take a lot out of Siwat's story. And if you listen all the way to the end, there's a discount code for you to get your hands on some Recoup. So I encourage you to listen to the full interview. And with that, I'll turn it over to my friend and entrepreneur, Siwat, to talk about Recoup Wellness. I'll see you there. And you have such an amazing story. And I know you've helped me so much over the years as I've made the transition from the corporate world to starting my own business. So I'm really excited for you to tell this story, and I think it will help a lot of people.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. This was great. When you first sent me an email asking me to be a part of this, I was super excited and honored at the same time. So yeah, thank you for having me.
But remember, man, we actually spoke about this a while ago. I think this was actually the fall of last year, which feels like, so this fall 2019, which feels like 35 years ago at this point. But remember we were talking at that one coffee shop in Dumbo.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that I had this idea for a podcast, and you were the very first person that came to my mind.
And it was interesting because I had no idea how to even start one. And I even started asking you questions like, is it complicated? What's involved in it? And here we are now, which is amazing.
Totally. But it's also funny though, because right before that conversation, I actually walked into Foragers. And for those who don't know Foragers, it's like a really hip, popular shop in Brooklyn. And when you walk in and you walk towards the beverage section, the very first thing in my line of sight was Recoup Beverage. And it was one of those things, it was so cool to see, an idea that you had in your head 4 years ago being something that was on the shelf that people were buying. I could see people pulling off the shelf. And I mean, number one, I was like super proud of you, but I was just thinking like, this is amazing how this was an idea in someone's head that is now on a popular store shelf and people are buying it and enjoying it. So it was amazing to see that. And then I saw you right afterwards and I'm like, we have to tell this story.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, if our beverage popped, that means we have to give credit to our graphics designer as the agency that's worked on our label, and my co-founder Susan, who has done an amazing job with just making sure that we pop on shelf. That's always kind of been our goal. We feel like if we can catch your attention on shelf, I think 60% of it is done, and then the rest is hopefully you'll grab us and buy us and try us out and continue to buy us.
So here you are, you're an established beverage product. Obviously, you're still growing. We're going to get to that. But you're here. You're in the market. You're a player. People can find you on store shelves. So let's take it all the way back 5+ years ago. I mean, wherever you want to go. So before this was even an idea in your head, like let's start there.
Sure. Recoup is kind of looking back at it now and actually talking to you. I've talked to you a lot. It almost seems like Recoup was a natural progression for me. Health and wellness in general has always been something that's very important to me. I spent the first 3 years of my life in a hospital. By the time I was 12, I had undergone 10 major surgeries, one of them being open heart. So recovery and just health and wellness in general has always been something that's top of mind for me. I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something and start something on my own. I just didn't know exactly what it was. Ended up going into healthcare, being in the healthcare industry, and stumbling upon medical research while I was working with kids with heart and lung disease, actually up in New York Presbyterian Columbia Medical Center. I stumbled on medical research that says 2 teaspoons of ginger helps with nausea, vomiting.
And wait, when was this when you came across this research? How long ago?
I think it probably was like 2012, 2013.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this was a couple years before Recoup.
Couple years, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a year, yeah. And it was something kind of that I kept in the back of my mind. I always keep a book of ideas, keep things kind of just in this book that I can always go back to.
Okay, so wait, let's stop right there because that's amazing because I feel like so many entrepreneurial stories I've heard come out of a book of ideas where it's just kind of logging ideas. Doesn't mean you're going to do it now. I mean, so if you're thinking that this was 2012 and you're logging it, Recoup was founded in 2015.
Yeah.
So that's 3 years from writing it down to actually taking the first step. But it's a really interesting point though, because I feel like I hear that from a lot of entrepreneurs where it was just kind of an idea log that they had that just kind of came to them at one moment in time. So is this something when you saw ginger, you just wrote it down, you forget about it? Or was this something that was kind of still kind of gnawing at the back of your mind?
Believe it or not, it was just a bunch of different things. I went through this period where I wanted to really understand my past because I was a child. So I never really understood. I knew at a very high level what I went through, but I didn't know what the complications and the intricate details of it. So I went back to work, believe it or not, at the hospital I grew up in. So
wow, that's amazing.
I ended up talking to the nurses, the doctors, the surgeons that operated with me, and I started to piece everything together. And that's when I started looking at different research on recovery.
But you were working with the same people that operated on you?
Yeah. And
was that intentional or just happened randomly?
It happened randomly because where I was working, there were different medical studies and research going on, and those surgeons were participating in that, and they would send patients to us to do diagnostic testing. So as I started to, believe it or not, I actually didn't even know that they operated on me or they took care of me, but when they saw me signing the paperwork, they saw my name.
That is the weirdest thing. No way.
And they were kind of like, this can't be the same person. And then so they would stop by my office and we'd start talking. Yeah. And
I mean, I kind of feel like, there's randomness that happens, but I feel like that's more than randomness. Like, whether you call it the universe, whether it's something that you were maybe, as much as you say it was unintentional, maybe there was something intentional about it, right? I mean, do you ever think about that? I mean, like that is so random.
Absolutely. I have always been really thankful for the care that I received. And I think for the most part, while I was a kid, most kids don't really remember what they go through. So as an adult, being able to kind of reconnect with everybody that's helped me get to where I am, I'm extremely thankful. So I think it was definitely on purpose.
Yeah. But there was a part of you that was kind of trying to heal your inner child in a way.
I think so.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in kind of understanding me as a person, who I am, what draws me, what keeps me going, what motivates me, and part of that is I think understanding my past and specifically as a child, um, I went through a lot more than most people and that had gone through,
Yeah.
and I wanted to understand that.
It's amazing. So I definitely want to pull this back out because I think there's a lot to kind of bring back later in this conversation. But let's kind of then move to the next step here with respect to, okay, so 2012, 2013, you're kind of understanding, okay, there's major healing benefits to ginger, and you know just how it influenced your life. You're at the hospital, you're working with the people that saved your life at a very young age. But at some point, okay, you're putting in the log, but then like, what's the, okay, wait, maybe I want to do this. Like, kind of bridge that gap then.
Yeah. I ended up going back to school, just because I felt like I needed some type of infrastructure. And that's not to say that everybody needs to go back to school. Some people can just dive right into it, and I applaud those people. I don't know what sparked it, but
So this is going back to get your MBA.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what sparked it, but I do believe I was drawn to it, so I pursued it.
Did you go with the intention of saying, I want to start my own business at the end of this? Okay.
To be honest with you, the programs that I were looking at were really geared towards entrepreneurship. And with the way that the program that I was looking at, which was Cornell's program, and what was going on in New York City at the time with Cornell Tech and the entrepreneurship support that they were getting from the administration, and the university up in Ithaca, I felt like this was exactly what I needed.
Interesting. So you went in, but it wasn't, when you went into Cornell though, it wasn't, I've got this idea for a gender-based beverage, or was it? Did you know what you're going into?
I went into Cornell with, I have a bunch of different ideas. I want to figure out what the best way to kind of vet these ideas. That being said, I graduated from the program not really having an understanding of which one was the best idea. But I had an understanding of what it's like to be the type of leader or organizer that I would like to be to start my own company. That's what I got out of business.
So that's interesting. So you didn't, because I feel like I hear a lot of people who go in with an idea and they go to business school almost like as an incubator, and they're like dead set when they go in, this is what I'm going to do. And when they come out, they're doing it. But you were a little different. You went in with a whole host of ideas. Was business school in a way to kind of help almost be your own consultant and kind of have a 5,000 foot view of these various ideas to see which one would kind of win out at the end?
Business school in general, I walked away with a couple things. A better understanding of the type of leader and manager I'd like to be when I start my own company. And that to me was extremely important, because I felt like when you're not in business school and you have managers and you have all these different people overseeing you and you have different mentors, you automatically assume that you need to be a mirror image of those types of people to who you are. And I think what I got out of business school is there are different types of management styles. There are different types of ways to motivate and push people and get the best out of people and get people behind a vision or a mission. And it needs to align with who you are as a person and what you're comfortable doing. You can read all these books on management. You can read all the biographies on management. And certain people say you need to be this way. You need to crack the whip. You need to do all these types of things. But if you're not comfortable cracking the whip, it's just difficult.
Yeah. When I was in business school, it's when the Steve Jobs biography came out. And I felt like there were definitely a cohort of people that like all of a sudden wanted to be Steve Jobs. And it just didn't fit, right? I mean, that worked for him. But like, I could never be a Steve Jobs type manager. It just wouldn't work. But I feel like people feel like they need to do it because it worked so well for somebody else.
And I think that's the scariest thing is like people read Steve Jobs, people read Jeff Bezos, and they read Elon Musk, and they're automatically like, that's the way to do it. And I learned in business school that that's one way to do it, and that's one way to align yourself.
So you learned, from the managerial standpoint, if I can summarize, it sounds like you just learned to have your own authentic voice and be comfortable with that as a leader.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what else did business school help with respect to kind of launching this brand?
I also think in my third semester innovation project, it helped me really put together a team
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of move forward with a team. Most of the times when I started something, it was just my own self-motivation and then drawing people in and kind of saying like, hey, would you be interested in helping me out? At the end of the day, um, you will have learned, even if this doesn't work out, you will have learned what it takes to one, start something, two, to kind of learn about this industry that we're looking to penetrate and things like that. And at the end of the day, you will have some valuable information that you could probably take on the next time, with
Mm-hmm.
or without me. So
Mm-hmm.
um, business school in our third semester innovation, we put a team together and we divided and conquered, and we did actually pretty well. We ended up in the finals of the competition, and it was really exciting. And and the idea was
Yeah.
amazing, and we wanted to pursue it afterwards, but just like all ideas and people getting involved, you need to have people 100% committed. Otherwise, it just falls through the cracks.
Well, you're hitting on a good point, right? Because ideas are important. You need ideas. And like, you
Yeah.
know, again, journaling in your notebook, the various ideas, like that's where it all starts. But ideas are useless. Like you could have the best idea in the world, and if you don't act on it, it's
Agreed.
pointless, right? But did that class though, you know, even though you guys didn't do it, and even though it was just a semester long, did it give you the confidence of, all right, we have an idea and now we're actually taking some steps to kind of move the idea forward?
Yeah, it did. I don't think, I mean, most of the ideas I've always had has always just been, they've become, if they boil in me long enough, I'll pursue them until I hit a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do hit a wall that at the time I feel like, because I was just committed to a lot of other things like a full-time job or business school, I would put those on hold. I'd never give them up entirely. I'd put them on hold.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, those ideas and ideas in general, like taking that jump is always huge.
Mm-hmm.
I think the innovation project was that was helpful, or what I learned and walked away with was um, having a team is extremely helpful. And although you can do a lot on your own, um, being able to get different perspectives is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I walked away with, because
Interesting.
fast forwarding to where we are, to when I first started Recoup, I started it on my own again.
Mm-hmm.
And I rallied it for a year and a half, and then I brought on a co-founder.
Yeah.
But what I learned from the innovation project was, as I was working, I learned to reach out to experts and reach out to people that were in the industry that I needed to know about and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think in most of my other ventures, I've kept in kind of this bubble of like, all right, this is kind of what I'm working on, and I'll continue to pursue it and keep working. But
Yeah.
after the innovation project, I realized that I'll have something, I'll have this idea, this minimum viable product, reach out to certain people, connect with them, get their thoughts, get feedback, go back, work on it again, go back out.
That is a fascinating point. It's funny. I didn't necessarily know where you're going at first when you're talking about working in teams, and you nailed it, right? Because I was thinking like, wait a second, I saw you start Recoup like on your own. So how did working in teams help you? But when you went on, you made a really good point though, in that I see a lot of people who do this where they have an idea for a business and they might take the first step in the right direction, but they keep it contained. They don't tell anybody about it. They don't want to tell anybody about it. You know, they might kind of hint that they're working on something, but like in a way, I mean, part of that is not wanting the intellectual tension of someone telling you that you might not be thinking about it the right way, right?
Yeah.
And I think with teams, you know, so it's funny, like when I went to business school, one of the, I'll just tell a real quick story. It was fascinating. Yeah. It was, and it's funny because like a lot of business school, like I think about like what I'm doing now, and like as much as I didn't necessarily need business school, it was super helpful in kind of learning these little nuggets as well. And it was really interesting. So my very first class, it was a leadership class, and it was like we kind of got to know each other for the week or so before business school. And the group I was assigned to, it was an awesome group. It was like people that I really clicked with the very first week when we were doing kind of our orientation and all that good stuff. And we were just like, oh man, we're going to crush it. We're like, okay, we got an awesome team. And we had a case study, and we were putting together our first paper. And again, we were all around a table, and like you would throw out an idea, I'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. I would throw out an idea, I'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. And we ultimately, we were like fist pumping. We were like, yeah, this is amazing, right? So we go in, we submit the paper, we're kind of cocky, we have a little swagger, and we end up getting it back, and we got a D minus. It was like a D minus. And it was one of those, like, I mean, that's like worse than an F, right? So it was like an F, at least, like maybe we just totally missed the mark, but a D minus is like, no, you knew what you're doing, but you just didn't do a very good job.
Yeah.
And we went to speak with the professor afterwards. Again, it's my very first class, and this is like one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from business school. We went up to the professor, and we're just wondering, like, wait, how is this paper so bad? Like, to be honest, like we thought we kind of crushed it. And he goes, well, let me guess. You guys got along really well during this project. We said, yeah. I mean, it was awesome. We have an awesome team. Like, we're the best. Like, like we just don't understand how we did so poorly. And he goes, you guys got along too well. And he goes, your paper was one where everyone was throwing out ideas, and you guys were all super excited about it, to the point where your solution for the case was something that was just unrealistic, right? And it was one of those, you guys had too many priorities, you guys had too many initiatives. And it was ultimately, like he said, you guys need more intellectual tension, and you guys need to fight a little bit more. You guys need to fight for who has the best point. And ultimately your end result and your recommendation really should be the result of kind of battling it out and ultimately having the best one or two win. And it was really fascinating because a couple of things. After that point, we actually ended that semester not necessarily friends, but we ended up producing really good results after that. We ended up getting good grades.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting, though, because I think about that now, running a business, and it is really scary to get other thoughts and feedback, and that might not kind of jive with what you're thinking. And it feels really uncomfortable, but you need it in order to move forward. You need some intellectual tension.
Yeah. And that's important. You need other people's perspectives. I think one of the things I would caution is that you need other people's perspectives with the understanding that they're in the industry and an expert in that specific field. Because criticizing for the sake of criticizing, or providing comments for the sake of providing comments when you don't have necessarily any experience in the topic, it's always a little bit rough.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you graduate business school then, and again, you want to start something. You got this journal. You learn your managerial style. You learn the importance of working with teams. So then, like, let's just talk about that moment where you decided, what, I think I want to start a beverage company.
Yeah, I was actually working at a digital healthcare accelerator at the time. I was working with the founders of the digital healthcare accelerator. The accelerator brought 10 teams in, and they invested $10,000 and owned a small stake in the company. And their job was to refine their pitch, gain sales, really test their product. And as I was there, it was great because I was like a fly on the wall. I was sitting on the table with the founders and the directors, listening to what entrepreneurs were going through, and then setting up meetings with advisors and things like that. And I started to get a better understanding of what to expect. And right around towards the end, I think it was like a week before the demo day, I was like, you know what? I think I've gone through enough in my life that I think I can go back into my book and really figure out what it is that's pulling towards me and really pursuing it. And so I went back and started to look at the different ideas, and Recoup was the one thing that just kept pulling on me.
When you put it in the journal, did you name it Recoup at the time, or you just put like Ginger Beverage Company?
It was actually a recovery beverage company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And so, yeah, and I put all these detailed notes on like the concept of recovery, and a lot of that actually has led to kind of what Recoup's mission is and things like that. But I mean, at a very high level on those notes, it was very much like getting people back to your best self. whatever that means, and a product that's healthy and things like that. I mean, back then you still have a lot of products that are artificial and blue and yellow and green in beverages. So it was something that I think is even back then was different and unique.
But here's the thing. So you're just kind of going through this. So you have these ideas, you're putting down notes, and then you're thinking, okay, now I need to get the education. You went to business school. You kind of need to learn a little bit more about yourself. You just wanted to, kind of observe more, see more case studies, et cetera. Then you go into a job that's kind of an extension of business school in a way, where you are working for this accelerator where you're helping them make investments, and you're seeing, entrepreneurs come in, you're seeing their pitches, you're seeing what works, what doesn't work. So you're writing it down, you have the education, but there's a risk to too much education, right? I mean, at some point in time, you got to take the ball and shoot. So then what was that moment? Like what gave you the confidence to say, give me the ball, it's time?
I don't think you're ever 100% confident that you can go out and just do it. I think there's just a triggering point where you're just drawn to something and you just go ahead and do it.
So what was that triggering point?
The triggering point was just going back into my notes and seeing that beverage and just being like, you know what, I've been holding off on this way too long. I in business school, they always say too, like, you have all the tools you need to manage people to be successful. You just got to put it out there.
But there wasn't like a pain point at the accelerator. It wasn't that it was a short-term, consulting type gig. There was no deadline. I mean, like, how did it go to say, like, I feel like there's got to be some sort of pain, or there's got to be some sort of catalyst. And maybe there's not, but I feel like for everybody, for any journey, there's got to be kind of that one moment where you say, all right, you know what, now's the time to pull back that journal and to see what really lands.
I think it was just being around all those entrepreneurs.
You got the itch?
Yeah. And also being around the founder and the director, just talking about it and kind of hashing the idea out with them. And then eventually the director was like, why don't you start trying this?
Interesting.
And,
so that's an important point too, though, because you created this environment of, you were around entrepreneurs. And it's one of, like, people say that, you're a composite of the 6 people you spend the most amount of time with. So if you hang out with entrepreneurs, you're probably going to be an entrepreneur.
I think so. I think that makes sense. I mean, even talking to you about things, I'm always kind of like, is there an opportunity there? Can we write this down and save it and expand on it later on? I like being around people like that, right?
Yeah.
I like people who can see if there's a better way to do things, or if there's a problem to be solved.
But the challenge though is because you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth in the sense that, I can't even count how many ideas you and I have had over the years. But here we are, like, you and I are both working on our respective businesses, and we have a very specific focus and a very specific client that we're serving, and a very, again, different product or service. So it's one of those things where at some point in time, though, you have to go from being an idea generator to someone who's taking action on something very specific.
Yes. And I think the catalyst is different for everyone.
100%.
Something in me, I will tell you, that it just made sense to pursue Recoup. If I can pinpoint to exactly what it was right now, it might be a little bit difficult, but I just knew that this was kind of this was the right thing to do, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So now say, okay, so you decide, okay, Recoup, I'm going to the journal, I'm looking at the notes. Recoup this recovery beverage is really sticking out.
Yep.
What's your first step? What do you do?
I bought a juicer.
I love it.
I bought an Omega juicer on Amazon.
So that's, I mean, how, it's amazing. Okay. I want to start a recovery beverage company. What's the first thing you do? You just buy a juicer.
Yeah. And looking back at it seems like it's the most reasonable, logical thing.
100%, totally. But you didn't create an entity. You weren't trying to whiteboard the name. It was just like, all right, like, let me get a juicer and let me start making juice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally logical. But how many people, like, I feel like I come across a lot of people that, I've got this idea. Okay, now I need to set up a business entity, and now I need to think of a name. So I'm going to come up with 50 names, and I'm going to send a survey out to 100 people. And it just seems like so many of us put barriers between us and actually taking the first step that's going to move us in the right direction. And I think
Yeah.
this is like another really good teaching point is that, starting a business or accomplishing anything, at some point in time, you just got to move it forward in the direction you want to go. And in this case, you want to start a beverage company, you need to make a beverage. So let's just start making a beverage.
And to add to your point, I think that at a very high level, the most important thing is to get to the product. When you have an idea, to get to the product as fast as possible, right? The logo, the business entity, all those things aren't tangible products yet, if that makes any sense.
I love it.
So to me, it was what can we get that's a tangible product? Like I had a bunch of ideas back in the day, and they had to deal with like a magazine, a website, a mobile app, and those types of things. And like, it wasn't anything until you had that MVP, tangible product. So
what define MVP?
For Recoup, it was just a minimum.
No, but define it for people. What does MVP mean?
It's a minimum viable product. So it's the bare bones concept of what you're trying to put out into the world. And
so it's not the end product. It's not perfection. It's just here's a prototype. It's the first thing. We're rubbing a couple sticks together, and this is the first thing that came up. Yeah.
I mean, it could be a paper plane if that's your model of something. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was, and I think over time, I've learned that like, when you have the idea, the first thing that you need to do is have that tangible thing. And logo and business entity is not the tangible it's something that you can give to other people to taste, to try, to play around with, to understand and provide feedback. So yeah, a juicer was what
I love
I
it.
needed.
Okay, so juicer, and then like, what did you put in the juicer?
Yeah, so I would go to the farmer's market, buy all the ingredients, knowing that I had a core ingredient, which was ginger.
And did you research like ginger-based beverage and kind of think about different combinations, or was it, I know it's going to be ginger, and let's see what other fruit goes with it, and let's just start putting it in a juicer and see what comes out?
I didn't research much, to be honest with you, of what's out there on the market. I just knew that my experience with ginger is it's very pungent, but I felt like there was a happy medium between what was too pungent and what people would enjoy. And so I just played around with that. Different amounts of ginger, mixing it with, at the initial time, I think we had 21 different flavors, and I invited everybody to come and taste.
I remember I was there.
Yeah, and it was laid out on the table.
That's right. There was 21 different flavors.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And how many did you want to get it down to?
3.
You want to get down? Okay.
I always wanted 3. Yeah.
And did you, because I remember that. So you had that, you hosted that party, you had all these combinations, and then you had the survey that we all had to take. So then was it just a process of the three that got the best results were the winners? Like, how did you decide ultimately how did you go from 21 down to 3?
Yeah, I mean, and we divided it out into different kind of categories. We had pungency, and then we had to do some education as well to our audience that were coming in, what maple water was, how much pungency of ginger can you actually enjoy, like take and enjoy, and then different various flavors. Believe it or not, I think the survey came out where there were 5 like very enjoyable flavors that people liked, and we just narrowed the 3 down to what was practical. Mm-hmm. Because some of the fruits weren't available on a large scale seasonally, or if it was, it would just be really difficult. So we narrowed it down to something that was a little bit simpler, and those were the 3.
Okay, so you narrowed it down to 3. Okay, so you bought a juicer, you made some juice, you know the 3 you want to make. Now what?
Yeah, and we started just creating it. I bought a refrigerator to keep it fresh and cold. And
was this common sense, or were you researching at this point, like how to start a beverage company, or were you just like, I make juice and juice needs to be cold, so I'm going to get a refrigerator?
Yeah, I didn't do much research on how to start a beverage company, because I feel like when you dive into those types of things, like they'll sit there and tell you like, you need this, you need that, and all these different things, and you're kind of like, I can
common sense, like it needs to be cold, so.
yeah, I can do this kind of lean and methodically in a way. Yeah. So
So at this point though, and I don't mean to get too technical, but at this point, did you create an entity at this point? Like, did you have the name of the company? I mean, at what point did you go from being like, all right, here's an idea, I'm buying a juicer, I'm making juice, I know that I have three beverages that people like. At what point in time did you say, okay, we're actually starting this business, we're attaching a name to it, we're doing all the filings, et cetera?
I think it was safe to say that once I narrowed it down to 3 flavors, I really started to look into the registering the company and things like that.
So, okay, so now you have an actual company, you figured out what the name was. I feel like the name was something that was probably percolating for a while. So even though you just had recovery, I feel like it came out pretty easily. Yeah. And I feel like, it's funny because I know other people have started businesses and they'll come up with like 3 different names and they'll, again, put out a survey, which is totally fine. I feel like you more or less were like, it's Recoup, and like, I kind of don't care what you think.
Yeah, it came to me and
it's a great name.
I wrote it out. Thanks. I wrote it out, looked at it for a while, and I just wrote it out in like regular, like just nothing complicated. Just wrote out the letters, spaced them out pretty evenly so it's easy on the eye. And I just sat and looked at it for a while, for a couple of days, and I said, all right, well, let me kind of do a little bit of research and see if this is trademarked and things like that. And found out that it wasn't. We have it trademarked. So yeah, I mean, at least that kind of was a little bit more strategic. I knew what the name was going to be, at least an idea of that name. Yeah.
Yeah.
People spend a lot of time coming up with the concepts of a name. It's interesting.
Totally.
I don't think that's a bad thing, but
no.
it can be a little time consuming.
I came up with Future You Wealth in my sleep. It came to me in a dream. I literally just wrote it down. And then that was it. I didn't look back. And part of it is, I think a name is really important, but at the same time, people do obsess way too much about it, where it's like, get the ball rolling first, like get things moving. And that's naturally, if you're doing a good job, if you're making a good product at the end of the day, and you can always change it too. That's what people also lose sight of. Yeah. Okay, but here's the thing. So you got it moving. You have the 3 products. You bought a refrigerator. You now have this company established. What next?
Yeah, so I started learning that when you create a beverage and you're freshly juicing things, the shelf life is around 4 to 6 days max. So that's why I needed the refrigerator. I needed to keep it cold, and I knew it had a very short shelf life. But that being said, I started just knocking on doors to seeing if.
But first, before you go there, though, like you needed some sort of label, you needed some sort of packaging. Like how did you? What did you do there?
I just created the label and the packaging on my own on Adobe Illustrator.
That's amazing.
And then I think it was either Vistaprint with their stickers or printonline.com. And we just measured out the size of our bottles and literally bought, I think it was like 2,000 stickers, because that's one of the break volume points.
Through Vistaprint.
Yeah. Or printonline.com or one of those types of things.
Do you have a bottle that you can show us?
Oh yeah. Let me go get it. So this was the original. We were an 8-ounce bottle.
I love that you kept this, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. So that you designed that. That's really good.
Thanks.
So you designed that all on your own?
I had the help of a graphics designer.
Okay. So you did hire. And how did you find your graphic designer?
Through a friend.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you knew you need some graphics. So you hired a graphic designer. Show that again. So when you look at like the nutritional, like how did you do that? How did you know that?
I Googled what needs to be in terms of nutritional facts, what necessary things that you need. And then I realized that you need somebody to actually, you need like a company to verify all that stuff. So I reached out to a third-party company. At the time, actually, I reached out to a nutritionist that I knew, and she said that she could create the labels for me in terms of all the nutritional facts and ingredients.
But how did you know that though? I mean, it's obvious when you buy something, there has to be nutritional facts, but at some point you're like, again, I keep going back to just kind of show the progression. Juicer, you got the products, you got the refrigerator. And now it's like, oh wait, now I need to label this and I need to package it up. So then like where on the label where you're like, or during that process where you're like, wait, nutritional facts, I need to put that on there.
Yeah, I actually just reached out to people I knew that started beverage companies, and they
Okay.
were kind of like, hey, like these are certain things that need to be on if you want to start selling at different places.
So that's going back to the point we were talking about with business school with teams.
Yeah.
And what I want to put a pin in it, because I feel like this is a good point to mention this, is that you weren't operating in a silo now. You are actually networking with people, going to people who did it before you, who are in the industry. And I think that's really important, right? You have to network, you have to talk to people, you have to be comfortable getting advice from people who did it before you. So it sounds like those were kind of the people that were your early mentors that kind of gave you the first steps of what you need to do.
Yes. I did do a bunch of research on kind of what needs to be on certain bottles. And even when I was looking at ingredients, I reached out to my alma mater and found that they had a maple farm that produces maple syrup as well as maple water.
It's amazing.
So maple water, just to give people an understanding, maple water is clear water that comes out of the tree between January and April. And they take that clear water, which has a ton of vitamins, minerals, and organic acids, and they boil it to make maple syrup. So that's the process of making maple syrup. But what comes out of the tree is actually a very clear water, and it's called maple sap. And by boiling it, you increase the sugar. Natural maple water has less than 2% sugar, but when you boil it, you increase the sugar to about 80%.
Okay.
And it gets thick and things like that. But what comes out of the tree, out of the maple tree, anywhere from January to April, is clear water that you can drink and has a ton of different vitamins, minerals, and organic acids.
Did you know that maple water was going to be a core ingredient when you first started this? Or was this kind of when you started going down the path networking, it came to you that's, wait a second, maple water could be a really good core ingredient?
I knew soda consumption was going down, and I knew plant-based waters were going up. Plant-based waters like coconut water, aloe water, all those types of things. So I started to look around to find something that was a little bit different than what was already on the market. And I got drawn to maple water. At the time, maple water was something that was just coming out and just starting to hit the market.
But when you make your first batch though, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but like you don't buy maple water like Whole Foods.
I did not. I ended up driving all the way up to Lake Placid to Cornell's maple farm, and I bought a 5-gallon bucket and brought it back.
I love it.
And started playing around with it. Yeah.
Amazing.
That was the beta test.
Amazing. All right. So back to the story here. So now you have your packaging, you have the label, you know that you have limited shelf life, you're keeping it cold. So now what?
Yeah, we were targeting a very specific group at the time specifically, and it was really for what I had gone through. So it was people that were going through some serious recovery. So chemotherapy, women who are pregnant going their first trimester. So we started knocking on those types of doors and identifying who the gatekeepers were and if they would give us a shot. And it was really hard. And so I
remember that was your very first. It was like, this is going to be for chemotherapy patients. Yeah. And that was the plan.
Yeah, it was a subscription model, 3 days before your chemo, 3 days after. That was where the research was verified. And we were hoping to get our beverage really targeted to that group and eventually get our beverage into medical studies and things like that. And so we got some tests, we got some sample sizes of people trying our beverage. We were giving it out for free, and it was just really hard to break through that. Like getting into hospitals is really difficult.
Yeah.
You need formularies, you need all these types of things. Getting into support groups was really hard too, because they're very protective of the people in their community. And I understand that. So that being said, I was knocking on those doors. And as I was knocking on those doors, people came back to me and said, hey, we really liked your beverage. Can we just buy some from you? And so
the gatekeepers wanted it for themselves.
Gatekeepers wanted it from themselves. My friends who tasted it really liked it.
Yeah.
And they were buying it from me. So that's kind of when I decided, you know what, like maybe there's a different opportunity here. So we ended up pivoting um,
Fast.
very fast. We started selling to my friends. Friends of friends started recommending to other people. And then it just became this thing where I started to think maybe we're just better off going door to door to like retail stores.
All right.
So
So this is another. I mean, you're making so many amazing points. I just want to kind of extract some of these as you're saying them. I mean, this is when you're starting a business. It's so you can get so comfortable kind of whiteboarding out what it's going to look like, who your target market is going to be, what your strategy is going to be. I mean, you can spend months and months and months and months, putting your head and developing a plan. But at the end of the day, you have to take action. You have to listen to the feedback you're getting. And this was one where, look, this makes sense. This helped you as a kid recover. And this is one where it helps with nausea. It helps with recovery. I mean, it seems logical that this would help with chemo patients. And it's just like, I'm going to knock on their doors and they're going to say yes, because I know this works. But you learned a really valuable lesson that's really hard to learn if you're just whiteboarding it out and in your comfort of your lab.
yeah, I've always been a fan of getting out there and testing your product, or testing whatever it is that you're trying to get out there and into people's hands. So, and because you can sit like you said, you can sit and think about and whiteboard and do all these different things, but you'll never really get the answer. The answers are out there with people that are potentially interested in trying your beverage, or people that are going to buy your beverage, your customers. Those are the ones that are going to be giving you your answers.
100%, right? So you got the feedback, you listened to the feedback, and then you changed your approach.
Yes.
Amazing.
And instead of going to support groups, hospitals, connecting with nurses, we went to retail stores, went door to door. I just walked in, found out who the decision maker was, had a bag in a cooler, and just told them that we're a new beverage company. Would you give us a shot on your shelf?
Okay, you're gonna now tell one of my favorite stories of Recoup. Tell the story of when you walked into a store and
Yeah.
you sold the buyer on Recoup, but
Yeah.
there was something missing from the label.
Yeah. It was a barcode. He looked at me and he was kind of like, how do you expect me to keep track of selling these things if you don't have a barcode? And I was like, he's like, here's what I can do. I can take your beverage, give it a shot. I can put a temporary barcode on it, but the next time, if your beverage moves and I need more, you need to have a barcode.
I love it.
So I literally then go back, call up my friends, do some research. How do I get a barcode? And Google search, and you file, you register, we get a barcode. We got 3 different barcodes for our SKUs. I mean, those are the things like, I mean, looking back on it, it kind of did make sense. And you're kind of like, how did you overlook it? But that's the beauty of it, right? Like, you create these things, and like certain things you'll find that you miss that need to be done. People will tell you. I mean,
100%.
they will tell you. You can't have it all in your head, and you can't have all the answers in as you're going through it yourself. So,
But how did that feel though in the moment? Because I mean, I feel like a lot of people there, look, when you're starting a business, it's really scary, and then you go into these environments, and it's easy to feel really insecure, and it's really easy for people to make you feel like this big. So, I mean, I can imagine going into this. I mean, we were joking about it right now, but I have to imagine like that was probably one of those moments where like you probably felt pretty small, right? I mean, you're going in, you're selling it, and the guy's like, dude, like you need a barcode.
Yeah, no, it is true. And you know, at that point in time, you're so preoccupied with kind of like, all right, if this is what he needs, I'm going to get it done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that he's giving me a chance on his shelf, right. And he's helping me out. I have to appreciate that. Right. And he's demanding certain things that is considered a standard across the industry, right? If it was some convenient thing for him that was just, oh, I just want it because it makes my life a little bit easier, we'd reevaluate that. But it's a standard across the board. Eventually, at some point, I need that. So he's giving me this opportunity on his shelf. Rather than saying, like, come back to me when you have a barcode, he's like, I'll create a temporary barcode. I'll give you this shot. And if it moves, next time you come, make sure there are barcodes on it.
Did it move?
It moved. again, I went back to either Vistaprint or online.com and just printed small little barcodes. I ordered them in like 1,000 sheets and just literally slapped them on the back of the bottle.
I love
Like
it.
I didn't need to redesign the label. I just bought barcodes and just slapped them on. And then the next time when we ran out of all that, we created a label with a barcode.
So, and then you probably went back and then you gave them the next batch and you had the barcode on it. It was all good.
Yep.
But actually, so one point, just to take a step back. So when you got to that point there, like how many doors did you knock on before you got that opportunity?
I knocked on probably, God, it must have been like 80 to 100 stores.
So this was 80 to 100 stores. You finally get someone to say, yeah, like I'll give you a shot. And you don't have a barcode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
It had to have been that many. Some said like, okay, come back in like a little bit later because our shelf is fully stocked right now. So yeah, I mean, we got the roundabout from we got rejected quite a bit. But I felt like I needed like 5 stores to test to see if this would move and get feedback. And it wasn't just like, okay, leave the beverage on the shelf and just come back and check up. Like part of my whole sales pitch was I would love to be on your shelf and I would love to do demos. Like I want to be in front of people tasting this beverage. One, I think it's beneficial for me to get a better understanding of what they think. And 2, it's an education to kind of teach people about our beverage. And I think when we're dealing with small independent stores, they value that because usually they just have beverage companies come and just drop off stuff and it's a burden on them because they want stuff to move, right?
Totally. And when you go into a lot of these stores, I mean, you just look at the beverage section, it's super overwhelming today, right? So, I mean, at least having someone where they're committed to it, they're willing to do demos, they're connecting with their customers, but also did this give you an opportunity to turn the associates into salespeople for Recoup?
Yeah, it did. It actually was really helpful just when we were doing demos. The salespeople there would also try our beverage. I would actually let them try it because I feel like when I'm not there, they're going to be the ones that speak to the beverage as they see people trying to figure out what beverage to decide that they want. And we were really fortunate that our taste is kind of unforgettable in terms of like its ginger pungency. So, and ginger has been pretty mainstream for a while now. People love it. So it was one of these things where the salespeople became kind of almost evangelists and supporters and brand ambassadors for us. So that was nice.
Which would not have happened if you just dropped off a box and it was just another beverage on the shelf.
Exactly.
How about the personal story? Would you kind of let them in on kind of the origins of Recoup and how it you had your background in health issues that you've had?
Absolutely. The good thing about doing demos is you can connect with customers, and some of them love to hear your story. Some of them are just there to taste the beverage, and maybe they won't buy it at that time, but the next time they see it on shelf, they'll reach for it.
Yeah.
With the people that had the time and were interested in knowing about the story, I would share the story. Yeah.
So, okay. So then you got in, you mentioned you needed about 5 stores or so. And how long did it take to get to the 5 stores?
It took a while. It took about 2 to 3 months. Yeah. We were constantly tweaking and constantly updating things. I would go back to the same stores and tell them that we changed our formula just to kind of see if they would give us a shot. And maybe it was more towards their palate this time around and things like that. So yeah, we kept knocking on the same doors, different doors. And yeah.
And then you start getting recurring.
Maybe it took 2 months. Yeah.
2 months. I mean, that's a long time, but not at the same time. It probably felt like a long time. But so then fast forward to remind me, how many stores are you in today?
We're close to about 30 now.
30. And the big stores too.
Yeah, bigger stores. And in the beverage industry, it's more about velocity and turn frequently. and that's important. Like if you can prove that you have velocity and reoccurring people buying your beverage, that's important. And we wanted to kind of stay that way for the time being. Our goal is to definitely grow. And I think more than ever now, we have this expansion plan and we're looking to grow. But the most important thing to me was to really understand our customers, when they're buying it, why they're buying it, what they like about it. And so we wanted to concentrate on specific stores and be able to connect with our customers as well as the buyers that we have, and really understand who a Recoup customer is.
Mm-hmm.
And once we identified that, we felt like we could properly create a growth strategy plan.
But do you have a example of what Recoup looks like today?
Yes, I do. So this is our watermelon blood orange flavor.
Look at that, man. Wait, put the two right up next to each other. That's amazing. Look at that. That's unreal. So, okay. So, and you've also, the flavors have changed. So let's just,
yeah.
So I do have a couple questions. I know we're going a little long, but at the same time, I mean, you're just, this information I think is so useful and valuable. Just a couple of things. So, one thing, you talked about the importance of teams and the importance of, getting feedback, but at the same time, I wonder if you encounter this. So, I have my MBA. I have a lot of people that I'm around on a day-to-day basis are in business, have their MBAs, et cetera. And I feel like it's very different from when you work in like a Fortune 500 company and going to a startup. And I know that I face this all the time, starting a new business where, people love to give their opinions on what you should be doing. And while it's super important, I've gotten such amazing feedback over this year or so that I've been in business. There's also like, it can get really frustrating. And I think some people are just so off base because they're used to being in that corporate environment. Do you experience that as an entrepreneur, and how do you deal with it?
All the time. It's interesting. I have friends that work for large companies, are very successful in their careers in different industries. And I think I tell them all the time that their world is a lot different from my world. Their meetings and their reporting to different various people, directors and of large companies. And my world is, I connect with buyers and they'll invite me to Friday taco night in their neighborhood. Right? So
I love it.
So yeah, my world is different. The best thing that I can do can compare it to is I create relationships with our buyers, and they are the ones that provide me with the feedback that I need to grow and develop Recoup. So it's a very personal relationship.
I think it's probably also, I think people underestimate kind of just the gritty nature of starting a business. So talk about some of that. Again, when you're talking to someone, and again, this isn't to say, right or wrong, good or bad, but I think you're making a really good point that, you're in a boardroom on not you, but like the people who are giving you advice, they're in a boardroom on a day-to-day basis, speaking to CEOs of various companies. And, here you are trying to be the first in line in a distribution facility. Talk about that.
Grittiness is the best way to describe it, right? I got an email when we were first starting off saying, hey, I want your beverage. Can you deliver it to me as I'm walking out of my office today? And I was like, absolutely, sure. Like, I'm not going to say no. Like, where's your office? And his office was like Midtown East. So I literally, and I was like, when do you get out? And it was like an hour or something. So I was like, all right, fine. And in the city, going west to east is never easy.
Yeah. But that's also like a very not very scalable business model, right?
No,
so it's one of those things where I feel like people hear those stories and they're like, how can you do that? Like, you can't build a business like that. And it's like, sometimes you have to do things that don't scale. And if that means that person's now a raging fan, they probably referred other people who are now loyal Recoup customers. Yeah.
And going back to the story, so I literally packed up a 6-pack and was waiting for him outside his office, outside the main office. And I was standing next to a handful of delivery food people. And one random guy walks up to me and he's kind of like, Do you have my order from Lenny's Sandwich? And I was like, and I was like, no, sorry, I'm not that guy.
I have two Ivy League degrees. I just graduated from my,
Yeah.
MBA from Cornell, and that's hilarious.
And
But that's part of it, though, right?
totally part of it. Like and it's a great story to have and laugh at now. But it was one of those things where like it didn't even faze me that much at the moment because I was so concerned with like getting this product to the person that needed it and getting the feedback. So it almost kind of just went above me. But now looking back, as I gave him the product, he was walking out of his office. I like looked back and I was like, oh, that's an interesting story.
Yeah, no,
So like
100%.
it is all about
But
grit.
you're not doing that now, or are you?
No, no,
Yeah.
no. It is all about grit. Like I can give a ton of different stories. Like when we first started out, we needed beverage processing to extend that shelf life. So from 4 days, we needed to get it to like 60 days, 75 days. So we tweaked our formulation and then we needed to actually send it to a beverage processing company. And it was all the way up in Connecticut and it was about 2.5 hours away. And when I reached out to them, they were like, yeah, we'll do it. But we can't do it in the middle of the day. You have to literally be the first one in the morning when we open, and we open at 5:30 in the morning. And it was 2.5 hours away. So I put everything in coolers, ice, put in the back of my car, and drove up and got there literally 5:30 in the morning, waiting for the gate to open. And once the gate opened, we gave it to them, and they were like, "Okay, come back in an hour." Picked it all up, drove it back into the city, put it back in the refrigerator. I mean,
That's amazing.
those are things that
Amazing.
just need to be done. Yeah.
100%. And again, put up the compare and contrast the Recoup today to where it was.
I can give you another. All right. So this is another flavor.
Yeah. I mean, so when you look at where you are today, I mean, you're not doing that anymore, right? I mean, you guys have a co-packer, you have distribution right now. I mean, it's one of those where I feel like the transition that you've made, we're now able to work on higher level stuff now.
Yes. Yeah. So we have so after a certain point when we saw our beverage, we started to get a better understanding of people who were liking our beverage, buying our beverage. I knew the next step was to get a formulation company to really reformulate our beverage, and our shelf life was always an issue, and it being refrigerated was something that was a challenge. So the next step was just to get a formulation, getting an expert to really refine everything, and we paid for that. And then we found a co-packer, and we talked to our co-packer to produce. That was kind of the next step that we needed in terms of growing and really solidifying this as a business.
When you look back at this journey, what are you grateful for?
All the people that have helped out have provided me with advice, pointing me in the right direction. And because I know if it wasn't for their advice and kind of their direction, we wouldn't be where we are. We still have a long way to go, but I mean, without their help, this wouldn't have ever been we wouldn't have gotten as far as we've gotten.
What do you think the biggest roadblock to success has been?
Biggest roadblock to success? I think it's an ongoing thing. I think there's always a bunch of different things that need to be done. There's just never enough time to do it. And that's a roadblock right now. Even back in the beginning, there's always something that needs to be done. And that continues now as well. So it's a matter of kind of weeding through the noise and figuring out what the most important thing and what's priority, and then tackling those, knowing that new things are going to come up and that'll take priority as well. I think the one advice I would give is entrepreneurs need to be comfortable in the unknown, knowing that there are certain things you're not going to have the answers to right away. And you just have to be comfortable with that.
It's always taking the next step, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we hit roadblocks with when we went from an 8-ounce bottle to a 12-ounce bottle. Like I went through probably I think it was 500 bottles, looking at different bottles, and there were 12-ounce bottles and none of them looked good and none of them were the right fit. and at certain points, you're just like, oh my God, we don't have the right bottle. And keep plugging through it, and we found the right bottle. So yeah.
Totally. And sometimes you have to make adjustments, and it's not exactly how you want it to be or how you need it to be, but you have to adjust, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So I have a hypothetical. So let's say someone went back, let's say you were able to go back in time, and it was 5 years ago before you were starting to Recoup, but it was in your head. You went down to your notebook and you said, all right, I'm doing this. And right before you buy that juicer, someone stops you and says, hey, here's where you're going to be 5 years into the future. Here's all the stores you're going to have, the distribution. Here's what the Recoup packaging is going to look like. So many customers you're going to have, etc. And so they showed you where you are now. They painted a really good picture. They said, but I have a trade for you. I have a briefcase, and in the briefcase is $1 billion. $1 billion in this briefcase. And I have a trade for you. You can either go on this journey. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be exciting kind of new thresholds and benchmarks that you reach, and then there's going to be setbacks. But you can't go on this journey if you take this briefcase. So again, the briefcase, $1 billion, but you can't go on this journey. You have to stay where you were working in a hospital. Mm-hmm. Or you can say no to the briefcase and you can take this journey that you've been on. What do you choose?
I'd choose my journey.
Why?
I always have been drawn to building things and creating things, and I like that. And it's not just the actual product, it's the journey that comes along with it that I enjoy. I know it's a process. I know things aren't easy, but I enjoy that. I yearn for that for the most part.
What if the trade were this, instead of $1 billion, what if the trade were, you know what, I'm going to put you in charge of the beverage division at a multinational company, but you can never start a beverage?
I default back to kind of...
You have executive stock options. You got the corporate jet, man.
I fall back to the fact that I like to create things and solve problems. And I think Recoup is out there really trying to solve a problem, and the journey that comes along with it, I look forward to. Yeah, I mean, I share stories with you all the time, and I really enjoy kind of the path we're taking. There are ups and downs, and there are certain things that we always feel like we should be moving faster, and the current pandemic, right? Like we should have been growing faster and things like that. But I wouldn't replace this for anything else.
I love it. One more question I have for you is, what was, actually two more. Sorry. What was the first threshold that you passed where you said, you know what, I think this is going to work?
I was excited when I saw our beverage. I saw people buying our beverage. Yeah. And this freaks some people out, but I think you'll appreciate it, and most people will appreciate it. Like for the stores that we were at, I would sit down if there was a counter table or if there was a place for me to sit down. I would sit there and watch people pick beverages. And when they picked our beverage, I actually was extremely happy. Like people who I didn't know would buy our beverage. And that was something where I was super happy.
Dude, that is powerful, man. Totally. It's amazing. I mean, because again, it was something that was in your head that's now on the store shelf, and people are picking it out and buying it, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing.
And they don't know me. They don't know anything about me, and they're giving our beverage a try. That to me was something where I was like, you know what? I think we have something.
Dude, it's beautiful, man. I love it. Last question, man. What's the next step from here? Like literally, what are you doing today?
Yeah, so we are redesigning our labels, and we're going to go into production, and our goal is to hit 100 stores by the end of the year.
I love it, man. I love it. Siwat, you've been an amazing guest. You've been an amazing friend. If someone's listening to this and they want to connect with you, social media, they want to find Recoup Beverage, on your website or, the stores, how can they engage with Siwat and Recoup after this?
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram. It's at Recoup Wellness. You can learn more about our product at recoupwellness.com. You can connect with me through our website. And anybody that's interested in trying our beverage, you can go online and purchase us. And if you use the promo code FutureUWealth, we'll give you a 20% discount.
I love it. I love it, man. I can tell you, I've been a fan from the start. I drink it all the time. You guys fly at the right altitude of the ginger. It gives you that right kick, but at the same time, it's not painful to drink. So it's actually quite enjoyable to drink. So Siwat, again, I cannot thank you enough, man. This was so amazing. And hope to have you back on again. Maybe we'll do this a year from now and get a check-in.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
All right, buddy. Take the next step, man. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I've learned so much from Siwat over the years, and I'm so happy that I finally have a chance to share his story with my audience. I can tell you he's helped me quite a bit in my entrepreneurial journey. And again, I hope you got the discount code. I'll put it in the show notes as well at ryansterling.com for you to get your hands on some Recoup of your own. Again, I hope you enjoyed, and please tune in next week. Next week, I'm going to provide just an analysis of the first 3 episodes with Brendan, Kwan, and Siwat, and talk about some of the themes that have emerged that are consistent throughout all 3 stories, as well as talk about a really exciting announcement in that my book, You're Making Other People Rich, is going to be released on September 29th, and I will provide some more details in next week's podcast. So with that, stay tuned. And once again, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.